right, guys, can everyone see and hear me okay? Hello, hello, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn. I'm teaching the class today. Welcome, everyone. And as always, I will be showing you some very interesting games, but I would love to see your participation. So I'll be asking some questions, and please write your answers in the chat. Hopefully, everyone will get to participate, and you'll see some really interesting games today. So what is the theme of today's lecture? Well, we are gonna free ourselves of the shackles of the dogmatic principles in chess. So you will see what I mean once I start showing you the games. But the key idea is you want to be able to think outside the box. And moreover, I want you to pay attention to the thought process, okay? Because you may be missing some very important ideas. So let's jump right into it. So the first game I'm about to present to you is a lesser known game, the one that Bobby Fischer lost. Everybody probably knows his famous wins, but this game he lost against another American top rated grandmaster, Benko, who unfortunately passed away, but he is well known for his endgames. Benko is an endgame genius. He created a lot of endgame studies. Now, in this game, Fischer is 15 years old, and he's playing in the interzonal tournament. So for those of you who don't know what interzonal tournament means, think of it like the Grand Swiss that just finished this year, where, last year rather, that Firouzja won and Caruana got second. They both got seeded to the candidates. So basically, interzonal is a big tournament, big Swiss tournament, Swiss system, where the top guys end up getting seeded to the candidates. So this is a big deal. At 15, he is already sort of potentially part of the world championship cycle if he does really well. Well, let's see what happens in this game. So first, we're going to see King's Indian, Knight f6, c4, g6, Knight c3. By the way, Bobby loved the King's Indian, lots of famous King's Indian victories. e4, d6, f3. Okay, first question, just to see how much you know about theory. Who can tell me the name of this setup, of this system for white? Oh, most of you can. Everybody, yeah, everybody knows. The hard part is the spelling, yes. I'm not gonna judge you on the spelling. This is exactly correct. This is the Semish King's Indian. And the point of this move f3, at first it looks a little bit silly. You are taking away the most logical square from the knight. But it's actually ultimate prophylactic thinking, because everybody knows that in King's Indian, after e5, d5, black's plan is to play for f5. Well, guess what? We are building this beautiful little pawn chain to stop that plan. Okay, so this is the point of the entire Semish King's Indian. Let's keep going. So it's now black to move. Bobby plays e5. It's not recommended to take on e5 and go into the endgame, because the king on d8 is not too bad. Black can still play c6, king c7, but in return, black will get the d4 outpost. So knight ge2 is played. This is a flexible move. White can still play d5. White is not afraid of pawn takes d4. What is the drawback of this move? Well, the problem is this bishop is not feeling very comfortable at the moment. So that's why Fischer plays castles. All right, so remember, Fischer is 15 years old here. He's playing in one of his first interzonals, big deal, big tournament. And he's playing King's Indian, very fighting opening. And here is the first surprise of the game. He has never faced bishop g5. Most people that he faced either play some kind of d5 or bishop e3. Okay, these are the logical moves. Now he is on his own. And the first thing is, let's see how well he deals with figuring things out on his own. He's out of book, as we say. He did not have Chessable back then. Okay, back in 1958, there were no chessable courses, there were no computers, there were no engines. Well, actually, I'm not going to flip the board because we're looking at from the white side of the board because Bobby Fischer lost the game. Yes, it's very instructive though. Although I may flip the board at one of the key moments later. But as I was saying, yes, in 1958, there was no chessable, no laptops, even no cell phones. Believe it or not, the way people learned theory was through books and chess magazines. And did you know that Bobby Fischer had to learn Russian so that he can read Russian chess books and magazines because they were the best at that time? And that's how he was fluent in Russian. All right, so let's keep going. Bobby took on d4. The first, maybe slightly unusual decision. As a matter of fact, the commentators at that time, including Benko himself, recommended that knight c6 might have been a better try. And now after d5, knight d4. This is a well-known pawn sacrifice idea, perhaps an interesting try as well, although one would need to investigate this further. But Bobby plays e takes d, which I think is the best move in the position. Knight takes d4. And now it's very important that black plays really quickly. Why? Because he's got himself in this bind. Sometimes you see this called the Maritze bind. It's not quite the true Maritze bind. In the true Maritze bind, this pawn is on e7. But the ideas are very similar. If white gets to develop the pieces, white is going to put pressure on black here. Let's see, people. Carlos says maybe c6. Yeah, very logical move, as a matter of fact. I think nothing wrong with c6. I also like the way Fischer played at knight c6 because, again, the bishop is on g5, so the knight is only protected by the queen. So in some ideas, you want to take and then prepare some knight jump with some tactics. So he simply, Benko simply plays knight to c2. Okay, so let's see what happened next. Bishop e6, logical move, right, guys? Developing moves. Developing move, rather. Bishop e2. White wants to castle, so far standard position. And here I love the way Fischer reacts. h6, very logical move. He's asking the bishop his intention. Are you going to stay on the pin? Are you going to move out of the g5 square back to e3, for example? If the bishop moves to e3, then the f6 knight is free to roam around. Knight can go to h5, d7, and lots of possibilities. So the logical move is to stick to the strategy, keep the pin going. And here we are. We're coming up to the next big deal. Here, pay attention, guys. g5. I actually think it's still a good move. Bishop f2, and here we go. We have to make a decision. We have two moves. Knight e5, logical move, activate a knight here in the c pawn, or knight h5, trying to continue the strategy of expansion and putting pressure on this diagonal. So how would you make that choice? And please write your answers in the chat for me. So again, it's black to move, knight e5 or knight h5. If you want, I can flip the board as well to make it a little bit easier. This may be a little easier for people. Again, everyone is Bobby Fischer. Again, he is 15 years old here. Let's see how you compare yourself to 15-year-old Fischer. Knight e5 or knight h5 are the choices. Okay, let's see what people are saying. So Narayan, Narayan says, I would go knight e5, get my first knight on the strong outpost. Okay, logical. And then I'm going to gain the tempo and then play knight h5 and knight f4. Very logical thought process. Ryo says knight h5 exclam with idea knight f4. And if g3, then knight e5. So we are split. I'm seeing people, half of the people are saying knight e5, the other half knight h5. We don't have a clear consensus. What is the best move here? Poll? You guys want to see a poll? Actually, the idea is a little bit deeper than the two moves. I mean, one of these moves is clearly best. I have to tell you that. One of the moves is clearly best, but the idea is really hidden. And the idea has to do something with dogmatic thought process and dogmatic principles that we are used to. Okay, so let me explain this to you. In the game, Bobby Fischer messed up. He played a very natural move, the move that also occurred to me as well, and to most of you. Knight e5, question mark. All right, that's all right. I'm not going to do the actual poll, guys. I want to focus on going through the moves, but it is interesting that a lot of people are split here. Knight e5 is not the right move, but it's not obvious yet why it's not the right move. I will show you quickly how the game unfolded. It did not go well for Fischer. But before we do this, the reason why I want to explain knight h5, why it's the best move, is, well, one of the reasons is, of course, the knight can go to f4. But there is a deeper reason. There's a deeper reason why we do this. Can anyone give me an idea? Aha. Yes. Bishop takes c3. Very unusual decision, giving up the dark square bishop. How many of you guys thought about bishop takes c3 when you were deciding between knight e5 and knight h5? Okay, a couple of people were that. Okay, that's good. So that means you are better than Bobby Fischer. You're better than the 15-year-old Bobby Fischer if you even consider the bishop takes c3. And I'm going to tell you why. Because after knight h5, castles, people of that time, of 1950s and maybe 1960s, maybe even 1970s, for them, bishop takes c3 was not a move they would even consider as a serious move. It violated all of their chess principles. You never give up that King's Indian bishop, even if you double your opponent, if you double the pawns. Now, there are some exceptions. You guys probably know of the famous Perelshteyn position, right? Where the center is close, he took on c3. Perelshteyn was definitely the first to show this. And I think a couple other guys at that time. I think it might have been in the 60s, I want to say, when that bishop takes c3 idea, but not on these types of positions which are more open. So this is actually the right point. You can start with knight f4, okay? But your next move you want to take on c3. Or you can change the move order. The point is you play here, then you go here. Queen ends up going on f6. You start marching the h-pawn. And here is a more or less trivia question. There was a chess player recently who played bishop takes c3 in slightly different King's Indian, but he did not double the pawns, and the whole world was shocked. Oh, I already see the answer. Rayo is right. Caruana Tata Steel 2021. Exactly. Fabi. If you guys know the game I'm talking about, it's against Wojtaszek. You can look it up. And Wojtaszek was shocked. And he's a modern GM, right? He's a modern 2700. He was shocked. Here, we're not shocked. We are doubling the pawns. This is actually quite standard these days. But for the player, even Bobby Fischer caliber player, that was totally new concept. Okay? Break away from your dogmatic principles. First example. So I want to quickly show you how Fischer fell apart, because actually it was very instructive. So he plays logical knight e5. Okay, let's see what happens. Knight e3, c6. Logical move. Why not? White protected the pawn. Black took over the outpost. It's not actually clear that black is worse, but he is. Castles. Queen a5. Very logical move, by the way. Taking the pawn is suicidal, right? You're going to walk into various rook d8 ideas. Let's keep going. Guys, pay attention to the moves. Queen d2, Benko. I mean, very logical, right? Benko just wants to connect the rooks. Rook fd8, and now rook fd1. Why the f rook? And the reason is he wants this rook to be potentially supporting b4 or going to c1 and support the c pawn. a6, clear intention to undermine the pawn. And after a4, it turns out that Fischer ran out of ideas. Typical King's Indian structure where black has a chronic weakness here, slightly weakened pawns, and no d5, no b5 breaks. From this point on, it's a classic domination where black has no counterplay. So he tried to regroup. How would you play here for white, by the way, guys? What's your autopilot move? B4, interesting. I'm not sure if B4 would be my autopilot. Yes, of course, simply A5. You already have a nice little hole here to take care of the opponent's immobile. Taking more space is good. There's no need to play B4 to weaken the pawns. He played C5. I don't like it, just because this one more hole is created. Honestly, black's already worse. He should have tried Queen E7, maybe passively kind of anticipating white's build-up plan, but I don't like C5. And now, how would you play here as white? Benko has many good moves, but the move that he played is a classic way to take advantage of black's weaknesses. Yeah, Davis is correct. Oh, wow, you guys are really good. Everybody got this one right. H4. Yeah, so you are playing really well. Okay, don't play knight d5. Don't do this, because after takes, whether you take with the e pawn or the c pawn, black has the powerful b5 idea. And now black is completely fine. This knight is quite strong. The knight can go to g6. The bishop is good. And after a takes b, black is getting nice pressure against b2. So one of the key principles when you control outposts like that is to only occupy them when it works for you. Have you heard of the saying, the threat is stronger than its execution? Very common saying in chess. And because you have more space, you want to weaken up black's king. That's it, guys. The game is more or less over. I mean, these are strong grandmasters, right? White, as long as white doesn't blunder and doesn't take kind of his foot off the gas, Fischer is cooked. All right, let me just show you how he lost the game. I'm just going to speed up a little bit here so I can show you more examples. Knight f5 logical move, takes. He tries g4, doesn't really do much. Queen f8, takes. Now, very important not to take the rook, because bishop d4 intermezzo and then queen takes. The king is too weak. I really love queen g5. Utter paralysis. The bishop can't move. f6 is a threat, and this knight is sort of loose. Knight f6, admitting that things did not quite work out for me. I'm just going to go back. And now simply the rook lift decides the game. Fischer does put up a fight. It's not game over yet. He plays f6, although an ugly move, but hard to give him a good advice. f6 was a big threat. If king h8, you can either take or do the rook lift. Just very unpleasant position. Yeah, now just look how pathetic this position is. Too many holes. This bishop is completely cramped. Knight d5, good move. Rook e1, double, rook e5, and now simply bishop g3. Yeah, Nimzovich phase, that's right. Now, he can take on e8 on d6, but why? Rook e6 is simpler. I like it. And the rest is more or less easy peasy. Little tactic here. Of course, Fischer probably saw that he's not losing right away. He has this intermezzo check on e4, but here he can resign. And that's how the game finished. Wow, unbelievable. Bobby Fischer at 15, who was already, I think that's the year he became the US champion. A really strong GM, yet made very kind of dogmatic thought process mistake, played knight e5 instead of knight h5. And that's pretty much all. I mean, he was not really in the game. Benko absolutely destroyed Fischer, yeah. And this is the game that is not well known. Benko was a monster. All right. So again, people back in 1950s were not aware of this bishop takes c3 idea. Let's go next. Okay, let's go next. Korchnoy against Kasparov. Now, Kasparov in 1975 was 12 years old, younger than Fischer. Fischer was 15 when I showed you that game. Now he is like you guys, right? He's like an average of you guys' age. So let's see if you can play like the young Kasparov. But we can also look at it a little bit from the white side. So first, I want to flip the board to give you a chance to guess Kasparov's moves. Correct. This was a simul. Wow, good job. Good knowledge of history. There was a famous simul that all the top Russian GMs were facing all the top juniors. So Kasparov was on a team. I think he was board 1 or board 2. I don't remember, but doesn't matter which board. He's playing the legendary Korchnoy. Now, keep in mind, in 1975, Korchnoy is rated #2 player in the world. Okay, he is not just an average GM. He's #2 in the world. Remember, he played matches against Karpov, and Karpov is #1. Exactly. Another King's Indian. What else is new? The Semish. Knight C6. Different plan altogether from Fischer's. Okay, bishop E3, A6. Very interesting plan by Kasparov. Knight G2, Rook B8. The intention is clear. He may consider B5 now. The knight is temporarily blocking the bishop. Okay, knight C1. And here comes very important moment. E5, Korchnoy plays D5. And Garry Kasparov was known for his dynamic, active positional play, sacrificing pawns left and right. He plays knight D4. And here's my first question. You are white here. Let me actually flip the board because I want you to think from the white point of view. Will you take the free pawn? So let's see. Think about it and put your answer in the chat. Yeah, most of you are actually getting this correct. Absolutely correct. No, absolutely not. This is not good. Do not take the free pawn. Korchnoy, on the other hand, made a very big positional mistake. He took the pawn. He did not understand the dynamic factors once the bishop comes alive. Their correct move is indeed knight b3. And I said white's a bit better here. But it's a big fight. Yeah, white has a little bit more space. So now, how could a player who is #2 in the world, I don't care if it's a simul or it's a blitz game, make such a big positional blunder, right? That was a key question. Maybe he did not understand that this is bad. Well, in that case, that tells us about 1975 that only a few players in the world, including the 12-year-old Kasparov, knew better than Korchnoy that these kind of pawns are not to be taken. Impulsive move. Yeah, I don't really care how, this guy's #2 in the world. You kind of know that modern players will not even do this in bullet, in blitz and in bullet, right? And this is a clock simul. This is like a serious simul. You have plenty. So I don't know about impulsive. I don't know. I am still leaning to say that the understanding of dynamic factors back there was not as clear as it is now. So you guys understand chess, at least dynamic part of chess, better than Korchnoy. And probably, as you agreed, that this is good for Kasparov, just as good as a 12-year-old Kasparov. So let's flip the board. And I want to show you the rest of the game because it is really interesting. Castles. Queen d2 back. And basically, Korchnoy says, all right, so prove it. I'm just going to play bishop out, castles, or get my pieces out. You are pawn up, but so what? Okay, Kasparov says, what's the big deal? I'm just going to play c5. I'm just going to take away the dark squares. a4, basically, idea to stop any semblance of b5 counterplay. Knight h5. Garry says, it's time to open up my bishop, time to open up my queen, say hello to the king. and Korchnoy plays g4. Here, you are black. How would you continue this one? And this is a really tough question. I believe a lot of people may get this one wrong, although I could be wrong myself. I don't know. Maybe you guys are better. So again, it's black to move. Kasparov messed this up. I don't blame him. I mean, this is not an easy decision. The move that he played makes more sense. Okay, let's give people a little bit more time. This is a very important moment of the game. You don't really have a lot of candidate moves, though. All right, so let's give it a little bit more time. There is one clear best move in this position. Bishop takes g4 is no good, guys. Bishop g4, you shouldn't even calculate. Bishop takes c3, you definitely don't want to play. This bishop is a monster. Just like the previous example, this is not it. Don't do bishop takes c3. This is not good. So you're really choosing between queen h4 check and another move. And the other move, I only saw one person mentioned. So I'm not going to give you any hints yet. But the other move is not queen h4 check. Yeah, Vihan. That's right. You got it. Good job. Let's see if Aryan got it. Good job. Yeah, Davis, you got it. Yeah, so we have some people getting this. So it is not queen h4. This is the move Kasparov played. Turns out to be inaccuracy. The best move is knight f6. This is taking dynamic chess to the next level. You basically just lost the tempo. Think about this. You had same exact position. You go here, he goes there, then you go back. What on earth are you doing? You're wasting time? Can somebody explain to me why knight f6 is the best move in the position? It looks counterintuitive, doesn't it? You just locked your own bishop. You gave your opponent extra move. You are pawn down to begin with, yet this is the best move by far. Correct. Yes, you have created a weakness. Okay, so somebody raised the hand. So what's your question? You can just type it in the chat. I thought g4 was a move white wanted to play anyways. It's probably because white missing the bishop. Yeah, that's exactly right. Typically, if the bishop is on e3, move g4 is not as bad. Without the bishop, it creates weaknesses that cannot be undone, right? Meaning that the king is stuck in the middle of the board. You cannot go this way. You're going to walk into attack. You cannot go this way either, walk into attack. No matter what, this king is stuck on e1, and all black needs to do is blow open the game. So h4 was, I think, was Korchnoy's plan. Queen e7. And now if h5, then there's a really nice idea. Bishop takes g4, takes knight e4, game over. Check this out. Knight takes, queen takes check. Oopsies, you lose material. But that's okay. Even if you didn't see that, you're still fine. And if bishop e2, you can just simply play h5 to undermine the pawns more. Knight d7. And now the problem is these pawns are too far advanced. They're too loose. And the point is, after knight d3, bishop d4, white is busted. It's very difficult to connect the rooks. I think the best try is to make a run to g2 square. But honestly, position is very uncomfortable. This bishop on d4 is a total monstrosity. Yeah, so this is very bad. So yeah, this was Kasparov actually made a mistake. So after queen check here, Korchnoy should have just traded the queens. I don't know why he didn't do that. And if bishop check, king e1, knight f4, simply trade off the knights. I mean, black does have compensation, so white's only a little bit better, so I said plus over equal, but it's very difficult to achieve the f5 and the b5 breaks. But I love this monster on g4 nevertheless. Okay, so king d1 was played in the game, knight f6, queen e1, finally he traded queens, knight d7, bishop e2, knight e5. Gary's playing really well here. And here was a mistake by white. He should have played h3. Said Korchnoy played rook g1. Now let me show you the difference. Now after f5, it's not the same thing as after h3. h3, f5, f4 is the key intermezzo. And white is better. Takes g5. He locks up the game. It's actually plus over minus. Surprisingly, it's a pretty serious advantage for white. The h pawn is going to get all the way to h5. The knight and the bishop are restricted. This guy is the best piece, but without the supporting rooks, knight, and bishop, it's sort of not enough firepower. So white is clearly better here. So you see, people made mistakes back then too. Rook g1, f5. Now black is back in the game. Takes, g5 anyways. Bishop d7, king d2, and now Gary loves tactics. He loves tactics. So if I were to ask you, can you find his next move? For you, it will be a piece of cake because you guys are tactical monsters. Right? Yep. You immediately notice the little problem here. The bishop is overloaded. And Gary is a tactical monster back in the day. He finds it instantly. He gets an advantage. He starts to outplay Viktor Korchnoy, #2 player in the world. Now imagine you guys are outplaying who is #2, not Caruana anymore, like Ding or somebody. Imagine you're outplaying #2 player in the world. That would be pretty good. So knight d3. Oh yeah, Firouzja, right? Firouzja is now above Ding. Knight f3. Bishop d7. He could have taken the pawn, but he decided to keep pressure with knight d4. Runs the f pawn. Here we got to give Korchnoy credit. He is fighting really well defensively. This rook a7 is a very nice idea. And after rook here, rook f7. c4, knight f4. And now we come to the last key moment of the game. Black has only one winning move here. Gary did not find it. I have to tell you that. Can you find it? They did end up drawing. The game was a draw. There's only one winning move for black. Not trivial, I would say. I mean, once you see the point, it's easy. But since Gary didn't find it, not super easy. Yeah, Vihan is right again. You're a monster today. Exactly. Yeah, the hint here is you have to sort of eliminate white's only active piece, and that's game over. Yeah, that's right. Rook f8, it is. Good job, guys. So Gary took on b2. He probably misevaluated this resultant position. Rook f8 is lights out, game over. Once you trade the rooks, b2 is fallen, and I don't think he can survive. So yeah, Korchnoy should have lost the game. But luckily for him, he found very nice defensive ideas. Knight e3, c3. Now notice how the bishop gets locked in by his own pawn. h4, check, knight g3, rook e6. Black's a pawn up, but it's not easy. h6. Now the game got drawn. So what did we learn from this example? Well, the most important example was right of the opening. Korchnoy took the pawn. You should never take that pawn. And then he actually got back in the game for a bit. They both went back and forth, and then Gary finally took over. Should have won the game, missed rook f8, and let his number 2 player in the world over the hook. Okay, so let's move to modern times. We're doing a little bit of a jumping through history. We're back from 1950 to 1970, now to 2000, 2020. All right, 2020, Cheparinov against Magnus Carlsen. Now, this is a blitz game, but nevertheless, in the blitz game, you have to make split decisions, split-second decisions. And Cheparinov, who is 2670, failed to make the correct decision when it mattered. So very instructive, and also somewhat dogmatically, I think he approached the position. Okay, let's take a look. So we have ourselves fun opening here today, the Benko gambit. How many of you played the Benko? For white or for black? The Benko. Anyone plays the Benko for white or for black here? Probably more people for white, but maybe some for black. Anyone for black? Not me, I prefer Benoni. Okay. Anybody else for, okay, I played the Benko. Okay, so not too many people play it on the black side. I used 4 years ago, not me. Okay, this is interesting. Benko is quite an interesting opening. You are sacrificing the pawn. I don't like where white plays king f1, g3, king g2. Well, Austin, guess what? This game is just for you. This is, for most of you, this is probably very important mainline stuff here I'm about to show you. Okay, take g6, and white just goes for this e4 move. This is the main line these days. Everyone, all the top players play it. This is the line that was also recommended by Sam Shanklin in his course, I believe. So if you guys follow Sam Shanklin's recommendation. And here comes very important moment. A lot of people as black would play bishop g7 on autopilot, right? As a matter of fact, how many would play? I will tell you. Exactly 3,512 people will play the move bishop g7. 1,500 people will play knight bd7. Only 53 people will have played the move that Magnus played in the game. Okay? This is thinking outside the box. We know what white wants. We're going to stop it with queen c8. Well, h3 is the main move. We're going to look at h3 as well. Now, for those of you who are interested to analyze this deeper, I want you to take notice of this position after h3, and we're going to go back and compare it to the main line. As a matter of fact, let me show you the main line. Bishop g7, g3. So you have to understand what white wants to achieve. White wants to achieve this position. White wants the pawn on a4. Okay. White wants the queen on e2. White wants the knight on b5. This is the dream setup. It's going to be very difficult for black to get any kind of counterplay. This, lots and lots of games go like this. There's knight e8, and now bishop g5 is by far the most common move. And this is very difficult for black. Black is under pressure. Still, people like Jeffrey Zhong play this, so it's not completely horrible. But compare this position. Okay, now let me go back to queen c8, h3. We're going to look at g3 shortly, because that's what Cheparinov played. Bishop g7, king g1, castles, king h2. Now, white played 1, 2, 3 moves, right? If you count to get the king to h2. Now, look what happens next. Knight bd7, a4, queen a6. Oopsies. You said queen c8 is a waste of time? Well, guess what? You are not going to put the queen on e2, my friend. And if you try this knight b5 idea, I could theoretically consider giving up the exchange. It's not that bad. I mean, f2 is weak too. So this is not that easy. Okay. So now queen c2 is what I analyzed. Rook b8. Okay. Make a knight b5 impossible because rook takes b5. So I looked at rook a3 and now rook b4. Again, the pawn is under attack if the knight moves. So I looked at rook e1 and simply knight e8. Dream Benko, as far as I'm concerned, you are not getting your knight to b5 that easily. Of course, the a pawn is too weak here. So this position is much better version, and I'm sure Magnus was going for this position. All right, guys, focus on the lecture, on the chess, on the moves. Go back. So compare that, right? Now g3 is played anyways. Cheparinov says, so what, Magnus? You're gonna give me one little check? That's not that bad. I'm gonna play king g1, and I'm gonna play knight g5, kicking the queen back. All right, and now is another moment of dogmatic thinking. So Black plays queen g4 and offers the endgame. You are a pawn down, my friends. Should White trade queens? All right, let's see what people are saying. But again, White is up a pawn. This is a classic case of basic understanding of openings such as Benko. So a lot of people saying you should not trade the queens because you are aware that the Benko endgame is good for Black. Wow, you guys are really good. Can you explain to me why is the Benko endgame really good for Black? Because you are a pawn down. Why would you be happy to trade queens here? Anyone? Because of the activity on the queen side. But what is it about specifically queens that you want the queens of? Well, I mean, the pawns on b2, a2 are weak with the queens on the board too, right? So that's not, yes, Austin. Okay, good job, guys. So the point is when Black attacks these pawns, White typically counterattacks against the king, maybe with e5. So the point is once the queens are off the board, our king on g8 is completely safe. Yep. And that's exactly what Magnus understands. Well, guess what? Cheparinov should have played queen e3. He did not. He took. Well, actually, no, he played king g2. He didn't take. He allowed Magnus to trade. And that's it. From this point on, Black is at least equal. He played knight a6, which is not the best move in the world because it does allow this interesting e5 sack, which I think is missed by White. He should have played that. Knight bd7 is much simpler, and Black is at least equal. The next moves are easy. We castle, activate the rook, activate the knight here and here, or knight g4 and e5, and target the pawns. Very good position for Black. So let's go back, and I want to show you how the game continued. Knight a6, f4, knight d7, knight f3. Magnus just sort of executes his plan. Here, because it's a blitz game, we got to give these guys some leeway. Magnus played f5, which is not bad. Knight c2 is even better. I like the transfer of the knight to d4 first. Notice he can never take because we take and win the pawn. So he plays f5. White should have played knight h4 and the rook e1. Not obvious how he would follow after rook f7, but he played b3. And after this, it's basically game over. Yep, the d pawn is doomed because Magnus is not going to miss bishop takes c3. And let me just show you, the rest is just technique. Black is completely winning. Magnus is not in a hurry. I like this transfer of the knight. Notice he cannot take the pawn because of knight e4 fork. Total domination. By the way, I recently learned the name of this pawn formation. It's called the bathtub. Did you guys know that? It's a pretty funny pawn formation, the bathtub. Okay, rook b8. It looks like one. Okay, a5, just take the free pawn. Here, Magnus calculated quite easily he can stop the pawn with rook b7, rook a7. And basically now we just need to get the king. We're going to win the pawn and get the king in here. So first he plays d4, wins the pawn, gets the king over, and here I guess he just either ran out of time or resigned, or I don't know what happened. This is just game over. Well, what did we learn from this game? Well, first of all, Magnus is thinking outside the box. Queen c8 instead of bishop g7 autopilot move, right? Cheparinov allowed the end game, and the rest was history. Black was dominant. All right, let me show you another modern example. Now, this game is between 2,200 players. This guy is almost 2,300. In a random tournament in Switzerland, I guess it's like a league. And you're going to be really shocked by how interestingly White plays this game. So let's jump right at it. So we have our classic case of Sicilian Conn variation. We have the bind going, right? We've seen the Marzi bind formation before. Fischer's son is playing. Actually, yeah, I don't think it's Fischer's son. I think it's just like the guy with the same name. I doubt it's him. Although he did play pretty good, so who knows? Maybe it's in his DNA. Queen c7, a3, knight c6, bishop e3. All right, so far so good. Standard position. White's got more space. Black's got some hedgehog going here. Maybe b6 later. Rook c1, queen b8. So he was probably aware of the standard knight d5 sack. Pawn takes, pawn takes. So he wanted to get the queen out of there. It does look pretty awkward to not have been able to get the rook out first. So clearly something didn't go quite right. g4, okay, aggressive. h6, h4, bishop d7. Here's my question. Evaluate the position and how would you play as White? How would you play here as White? I've never seen somebody play the Marzi this way. Okay, so this is good. Good learning for you, Austin. Okay, it's bad, but bad for whom, Aryan? Bad for White, bad for Black? Specify. It's bad for Black, okay. But explain to us why it's bad for Black. Okay, Alexander, good job. Yeah, Black does have less space, that is for sure. So what is your move, guys, for White? Oh, wow, good job. Some of you are actually guessing White's move. White did play king d2. That move really shocked me when I first saw it. It's not a bad move. It's not the best move, but it's not bad at all. It's actually not, I mean, I wouldn't say it's in the top 2 or 3 engine moves, but it may be like in the top 5. This is in my prep? What are you talking about? You had this all analyzed? No way. Your prep is exposed? I don't know about prep. I mean, first of all, the best move by far is rook g1 and just g5 plan. This is without doubt is the best. But king d2 was played in the game, and I was shocked. What is he doing with the king in the center of the board? So Black says, okay, I'm going to play queen c7 to try to get my queen out of there. And now look what White does next. King c2. He could have also played g5, not a bad line. He simply plays king c2, h5, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop c6, king b1, and king a2. The king made the little journey. Bum, 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 bum. And the king is quite safe. Wow. Talking about thinking outside the box and not following any dogmatic principles. Now, if somebody told me that with such kind of wide open position, the king can just simply start walking with so many pieces on the board. But the thing is, White controls pretty much all the key squares, and because of the massive space advantage, you guys are right. You can't do that. You can get away with that. White is clearly better. It's plus over minus here. So I want to show you how the game continued. White did mess this up toward the end. I have to tell you that. So he didn't play this perfectly, but for now, he is playing really well. e5, knight takes. So what? Knight d5. He could have taken and played here. That's not that bad for White, but I like knight d5 too. Now we open up the c file. Castling looks pretty suicidal right into the attack. So he tries to keep things under control. Queen b3, setting up a little tactical trick. Bishop c4 and oopsies. So he played b5, queen c2. I like queen c2. We're coming in to say hello. Here comes king f8. Again, castle looks pretty bad because of rook h6 or rook g1. I like that too. Okay, let's see what happened. Queen c6, queen d8, h6. Nice move to kind of break open the g file. f4. White is playing really well. Pawn e4. I like rook g1, honestly. Black is in total paralysis. But okay, he played bishop d4. Allowed the rook to get to the g file, though. Bishop f1. A little strange decisions started to come around here. Maybe he wants this. Knight g4, f5. Black gets first chance to get back into the game. Now, this is a really tough move. I'm not even going to ask you to find it, but Black had a move b4. Exceptionally strong move. Exceptionally strong move. Really good counterplay after this. So basically, always fight on, right? No matter how badly you get outplayed. Like clearly Black got outplayed, but he could have gotten into the game with this move b4. And the point is, after pawn takes rook b8, queen c3, bishop f6 with counterplay. The position that just gets really messy, and I think Black is more or less okay. Yeah, this is actually quite good move b4. You definitely want to get the counterplay. So White, Black rather played queen e8 instead, bad move. White should have simply played queen c3. Instead, he plays a bad move himself, loses all the advantage, and now Black simply should have traded, and the end game, believe it or not, is completely fine. The c pawn is not that dangerous. We're gonna round up and stop it. Position is already roughly slightly better for Black. So lots of mistakes happening from this point on. h5, mistake, rook c3. Finally, Black another has a chance to trade. He doesn't. Now, what happens, you may wonder if rook takes. Okay, simply bishop here. If rook c8 check, we just play king g7. No biggie. Yeah, so something went terribly wrong, right, guys? Black makes a mistake right back. White is back in the driver's seat and just wins the game. Yeah. So if we just kind of skip the ending, lots of mistakes, then maybe people were in time trouble, I don't know. But the king d2 move and the concept of walking your king right in the middle of the board with the board full of pieces and Black can do absolutely nothing is absolutely amazing. Okay. So to summarize, you have to break free of dogmatic thinking, right? What are the examples we looked at? Well, first of all, the Fischer example, how he actually played really well, but he simply did not consider bishop takes c3 idea, knight h5, bishop c3, right? This is a very common idea these days, to part with your most beautiful piece, the dark square bishop. Then Korchnoy. Well, Korchnoy was hungry for pawns. He was known to be the good old pawn grabber. Even though you're number 2 in the world, you should not take that pawn, right, guys? And he took the pawn. Gary, in turn, played really well. He made some inaccuracies, but nevertheless, I think we should give 12-year-old Kasparov some credit there. I mean, really amazing performance. Of course, Magnus Carlsen, he is just the best, right? He not only did he come up with this queen c8, very rare move. He knew the exact ideas why he was going queen c8, and also his opponent Cheparinov, top level GM, traded queens. Don't trade queens, right? In the Benko, why? Well, because we saw what happened, right? Just because your pawn up is white, don't be dogmatic, because we were all taught when you're ahead, trade. Nope, not always the case. Too dogmatic, right, guys? And finally, this last example, king d2, king in front of his whole army, simply walks around like, what's the big deal, guys? I'm just gonna go walk to d2, c2, b1, a2, and win the game. And that's exactly how White got a big advantage. The summary is, don't be dogmatic. Every chess position, right? Every chess rule has exceptions, and really try to think outside the box, because we learn a lot from engines, right? Engines are not dogmatic. they come up with really creative ideas, especially these days when we see in elite tournaments such as Tata Steel and such. All right, so any last minute questions for me? We have about a minute or two left. I would be happy to answer them. Please write them in the chat if you have. If not, then I hope you enjoyed these games. You definitely learned a lot. And I'm really happy with a lot of the answers. So you guys are definitely improving.